It's 9 o'clock in the morning and we're going down to Wolf Creek, Oregon. I'm taking you to the shop of a man who's been building guitars for over 50 years. Most recently, over 2,000 hours spent on a guitar that is appraised for $180,000. The man is a legend in the guitar world. Let's check it out. All right, so this clarifies for me a little bit the difference between a shop and a studio, okay? We're in a studio part of the world here right now, right?
Yes, sir.
But there are tools and there are fixtures and there are jigs.
Yeah.
But Brady's told me that you've got a guitar in here that you spent over 2,000 hours on and that is worth a pile of money. I've got to see it.
Okay, well, here it is, and it's a nice little pretty suede case.
Whoa.
So this one, yeah, I got over 2,350 hours.
2,350 hours.
Over the course of 2 years.
Good heavens, man.
Called Retablo.
Holy smokes, Batman. Look at that. Art guitar indeed.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. All right, so I see a lot of materials here. I see metals, I see woods of different kinds. Oh man, I see lights. Man, that would look good on stage. I'm not a rock and roll player, but that would look good on a stage, right? 24 karat gold plating. That's what I'm looking at.
So this was solid brass that I machined out and then had that 24 karat gold plated. I designed and machined all these bridges, or the tailpiece and the bridge. This is all inlaid. These overlays are ebony, and then you have mother pearl.
So all the metal, you crafted the metal, you crafted the wood, there's bending going on here,
This is actually not bent, it's all machined out of
a block.
Flat stock, 50 thousandths brass, and then machined out. Bending that would have been a little hard to get the contortion right. You know.
No, what about the wood, the surround around here? Is this all milled out of one piece of that?
Yeah, that was well, this is actually two pieces glued together.
Okay.
And I wanted to go mahogany for the tone and the warmth of it color-wise too. But because of the way it was going to be hollowed out so much, I decided to go with a torrefied mahogany, meaning it's baked way more than you would normally kiln dry.
Oh.
So it's incredibly stable.
Okay.
It's also called roasted.
Okay.
And then the other thing I did that's never been done before is the electronics are actually built in right here.
Whoa.
So underneath this, there's tiny little potentiometers and all the electronics, and then this is the volume and tone control.
That's the volume right there.
Yeah.
So these are entertainers represented in here? Who's represented?
Well, the guitar is called Retablo.
Okay.
And Retablo is it's historically they're like devotional artwork that's usually behind an altar in a church.
Okay.
And they're primarily seen in Spanish and Mexican churches, and that was the inspiration of it. So these are all like some of the founding, well, to me, the musical saints.
Yeah, musical saints. Yes.
Of American music.
Okay. Where did you get those images?
The images I did a lot of Google searching, and found images that I could like. Most of them, or that I liked. Most of them were black and white, so I had to colorize them, and then I hand painted all of these.
You painted them?
I hand painted them.
Wow.
And the canvases are actually old pine that I saved from they were beams in a church.
Okay.
So even that kind of ties in, right?
Yeah.
So this is pieces of wood I've had
symbols
for years.
on top of symbols on top of symbols.
Right. So I'll go into it with the meaning of what it is. I go into it with that. I come up with the first layer, and then it just keeps developing from there. So it just evolves as you go.
Yeah.
Like this one started off as the concept of doing a retablo, and then I did a lot of research on saints, and I thought, well, maybe I'll look for musical saints, and then maybe I'll look for all women saints, or maybe I'll look for all. I wanted a hook to it that made it special. And even when I decided to go musical people, there was the obvious cats like, Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan and people like that. And it's like, nah, that seemed contrived to me. So that's where I went with more of the roots people. So.
The foundation.
Right.
Well, mind blown. Okay, mind blown. I can see now, dimly, 2,350 hours of effort. Okay, he's explained to me some portion of the detail here. It just is overwhelming. So I've been in your shop here long enough to have figured out that you have been around this industry. You got a resume that won't quit, right? So talk to me boil down your journey from pawn shop guitars that got your interest to working at Fender, and now your own line of guitars. Give us the Reader's Digest version of that journey.
Well, it started as being a lower middle class kid from a 50s economy and family, right? Single income kind of a deal who wanted to play music. Couldn't afford it. Couldn't afford to buy cool new guitars or anything like that. So I went to work starting at 14 in the oil fields down in Santa Fe Springs, California. And that earned me the money to go buy guitars at pawn shops.
Okay.
And then I would take those guitars, but I wanted them to be cooler, and I wanted them to even have art on them. I'd paint art on them and stuff back then.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was sad, but true. And then, let's see, from that, since I was in Southern California, Fender was the company down there.
Sure.
And they weren't far from me. I grew up in Whittier, and Fender was in Fullerton. So I actually started applying at Fender at 16. Because I had quit school, and which I made a mistake. I went back. I finished. I graduated. I went to college.
Sure.
But at that point, bailed, and they didn't hire me, obviously. They kind of laughed at me because I was 16. But I kept applying there, and then on my 21st birthday.
Okay, just a second.
Yeah, okay.
When applying, do you mean you knocked on the door and went in the office? Or?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm talking going into the HR, Human Resources office.
You were selling it,
filling out applications and trying to get a job. And it was hilarious because at the time, I remember the one time I went, I had like a leisure suit on, right? Because it was the time, 70s. And, I'm all dressed up, and all these cats that were working in the factory were out there in the front office laughing at me because this stupid kid comes in with a leisure suit trying to get a job. And I kept applying. And on my 21st birthday, I took a day off of the warehouse I was working in L.A., and I came out to apply at Fender again. On my 21st birthday, I'm going to try it again. And I filled out the application, and I said hi to some guy that was standing there. And they said, okay, we'll take your application. I go to leave. I get in my truck. I start driving away. The guy comes running out after me.
Really?
Yeah. Guy's name was Jerry Brock. Turned out he was the general foreman of the whole factory.
Really?
And because I said hi, and he saw my resume and what I'd said, he said, come on back in. I want to talk to you. And hired me on the spot.
No kidding.
And so started 2 weeks later.
So you were excited.
Oh yeah, I was excited. I was excited, but soon that balloon soon popped, right?
It was a
because
job.
I said I'll take any gig you've got as long as I can move ahead based on my performance and my experience. No problem. I got a job sanding necks. No, I was supposed to be sanding necks, buffing necks in the factory. And the first day, I remember calling my wife at the time and said, I made a mistake. I can't do this. But I stuck it out and applied for every job that came up, and an R&D job came up as a model maker, and after 2 months. So by the third month I was at Fender, I was in research and development as a model maker. And 2 years after that, I became the youngest Fender guitar designer ever. And there was like 20-something odd people that had applied for the job. But I'm the only one that brought stuff in. I brought in a dulcimer I had built, and a lighting system I had built, and an amplifier. I brought in samples of my work because I was too young to have any real experience with it. So I said, well, this is what I do. And nobody else had. And Pete said, you're the only one that brought anything in, and this is exactly what you do here. What we do here is we build whatever the engineer designs.
So when you were 14 painting pawn shop guitars, you weren't wasting your time, man. You were laying the groundwork.
Yeah, that's it.
Holy smokes.
So, and at that point, model maker, we still had drums and pianos too. So I was building guitars, drum components, piano components, all kinds of stuff. I did that for a couple of years.
Getting to use all the machines in their shop to prototype the stuff that you were designing.
Great machine shop.
Priceless experience.
Yeah.
Priceless.
One of the things we did in the model shop too, besides making the prototypes, is we didn't have any way to build custom artist guitars at the time. So like the Cars would call and say, hey, we're doing this new thing. Elliot Easton, I worked with him for years, said, I need a new guitar. You don't make it. I want this color. It's left-handed. You don't do lefties. And so we would build those in the model shop in research and development. Okay. And so we would do that for bands all the time. Even did it for Frank Zappa, a couple guitars. So we knew for a long time we should have a custom shop. And we tried to pitch that. And it never happened. And finally in '87, we started the Fender Custom Shop.
Wow. So how long had you been there before you were starting that custom shop?
Oh, I had been there for about 9 years.
Wow.
And then I left for 11 months and then came back to start the custom shop with another builder, Mike Stevens. And then I ran that for about 12 years.
Wow. So how many guys were working in that shop when you were running that?
Well, when it started, it was just Mike and I. By the time I left, it was 65.
Wow. That's a big operation.
It was a big operation, good money operation, and a lot of artists. You know, I mean, like artist personas.
Yeah, yeah.
So the fact that I happened to have that leaning too, and management, it was, you know, it kind of needed that to run the place.
You were the guy.
Yeah.
That's
so it worked
awesome.
out really nice.
Cool. All right, so you wrapped up at Fender with a museum project. Tell me about the museum project.
The museum project was something that the city of Corona, that our factory was based out of after Fullerton, tried to do to kind of keep Fender in the city. And they thought...
They loved Fender.
They loved Fender, and Bill Schultz always wanted to have a little museum kind of concept. So that was something we started with the city of Corona, and I was the volunteer executive director of that, and on top of, it was a separate entity. It wasn't actually part of Fender. It was a separate entity. And we worked out a royalty-free licensing agreement with Fender to do that. And ultimately, I left Fender. I left my position as vice president at Fender to become the full-time executive director at the museum.
Okay.
And started the Kids Rock Free program, which was free music lessons for kids. And we developed a 33,000-foot museum, education facility, recording facility, concert venue. Yeah, from architecture to building to completion.
So
great.
Did you love that?
I loved it. Yeah.
So would you, I'm going to put some words in your mouth, would you say that was the high point of your experience with Fender, was that museum? Or what would you say was your proudest moment, the most fulfilling aspect of your association with Fender?
My most fulfilling aspect with my association of Fender, I think, was the custom shop at its pinnacle, at its peak. But that was all passion driven.
Yeah.
You know, differences in business direction and things like that was a reason why I left it, and I needed to follow my passion.
Sure.
So the idea of the arts education for kids, that was an evolution of that passion, a transference of the passion.
Okay.
So now I became as passionate as I was with Fender and the guitar building. I shifted that passion to music education with kids.
Okay.
And developing that museum, and I always wanted to build, so actually being part of an architectural building process to do that was awesome. Right?
Just awesome.
And so then we did that, and then that would be my pinnacle from a social, I guess you would say, point of view. You know, working with the community.
Yeah.
That was amazing doing that.
Yeah, human interaction in a big way.
And then dealing with like politicians trying to work out financing and grants and all that. A completely different thing than what I had done, but passion-driven still. Everything passion-driven.
Passion-driven. So when you work for that number of years for a company that is that high profile in the entertainment world, you work with some heavy hitters as far as the players, the musicians, the stars. And I have to assume some of those people have real specific ideas about what they want or what they need. What are some of your really top-tier memories of working with people that were making a big impact in the music business in those years, and what did they want from you?
Well, one of the artists I worked most closely with, I guess, would be Elliot Easton, who was the guitarist in the Cars. And that was like my era of music, you know, that 80s, 90s kind of poppy, new punk kind of almost thing. And Elliot and I became good friends, and he was a left-handed player.
Oh.
So much of what he wanted from traditional Fenders was not available, or very limited availability. So I ended up working with him a lot from a left-handed point of view, but he also had nuanced requests of neck shape and pickup combinations and inlays, whatever it might be, decorative things. Cesar Rosas from Los Lobos was another lefty, so I worked with Cesar a lot. We worked with a lot of big names like Eric Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and created like signature guitars for them. And they had very specific needs, but a lot of it was based on guitars they already had. You know, Eric liked a specific V-neck on one of his guitars. He wanted a more mid into it, so we created an active electronic circuit to bring him that. Stevie Ray Vaughan, it was kind of capturing what Stevie played, you know, and that Texas sound. So everybody was kind of different in that one. It's hard to pinpoint specifically for me.
Right.
A lot of that's too many years now.
Yeah.
Richie Sambora, Jeff Beck, we did a lot of work with them. And created, but lots of times what I would do in projects like that as well is I would pass that on to a specific builder.
I see.
So when we started dealing with a lot of those artists, I was running the shop, and interacting with the artist and their management, and then another builder might be dealing directly with that artist and getting those nuances. And so many times too, it wasn't the artist. The artists were too busy, so then you'd be dealing with their tech. You know, their guitar valet.
Sure.
And then you're trying to. So a lot of it would be that interpretation from one to another.
Wow.
And that could get frustrating.
Interpersonal skills with high-level musicians and high-level makers, right? Interesting. All right. Any guiding principles for your life or work?
Yeah, there's one thing that I think that everyone has to consider at some point in their life, some earlier than later. You either shoot for a lifestyle in your life, so you choose a career to shoot for that lifestyle, or you modify your lifestyle to shoot for the career you want. And I think that's something you have to decide at some point in your life. If you want to have fancy cars, fancy homes, you know, that kind of thing, you may not want to be in a creative job, because creative jobs don't usually make you a lot of money. Or in that sense, a lot of craft jobs, you know, artisan jobs of construction or metalwork, whatever it is, that may not lead you to that palace on the hill that you're looking for.
That's right.
But it might lead you to a career that you're just unhappy with. I chose that I wanted to take a path of passion and live a simpler life. And I'd much rather live that way. It's not for everybody. And, you know, fortunately, my wife, Dana, she's fine with it too. So that's cool.
With it too.
You know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's my biggest thing, I think, is to choose what do you want?
See?
You know, lifestyle or career. And
there's so much wisdom in that. And a lot of us never think carefully enough about what it is that we want. And we blunder into something that turned out not to have been what we wanted at all.
Yeah.
And so...
And it's too late to turn around.
It's too late sometimes. So I guess the takeaway on that is be as wise as you can, as young as you can. And think carefully about the difference between a living and a life, right?
Yeah.
So John, I'm a wood guy, but not as it pertains to guitars. Talk to me about species and process, and how do you go from just rough, raw chunks to something that's ready to go to work? What's going on here?
Well, there's a lot of cure cycles in the process, because the one thing you don't have in, or the one thing you have in guitars that you don't have in furniture is it has to stay together. You don't design in movement like you do with furniture, right? With dovetails and mortise and tenons. You know, you want to allow for wood movement. When it comes to guitars, they don't. You really don't want them to move.
Okay.
So one of the things is it all has to be kiln dried to a certain percentage.
Low percentage.
Very
no
low,
doubt.
6 to 8% normally, and then you want them to match within 2% any species you combine, or they'll warp and things. This is the wood and the species that I used for Retablo. Because it was going to be all chambered, I want it to be very stable. So this is actually, this is African mahogany.
Okay.
And it's called torrefied, or roasted, a lot of guys will call it.
Okay.
So it's been taken past that 6 to 8% lower. Usually it's around 2%.
Wow.
So there's virtually zero movement in the wood, so it makes it very stable. You can feel from this is the rough lumber as it comes in. That's very heavy.
Yeah.
You touch the guitar, you know how light it is.
It just floated up, yeah.
Right, and that's 2 pieces. It takes 2 pieces to glue together to create the blank.
Right.
So that's what, you know, we have here. This is...
So that reminds me of the back of Retablo.
Right, you see that ribbon grain,
yeah,
which is really beautiful because it just gets that iridescent effect.
Shimmering,
dances.
Yeah.
So this, when I get this in, these I'll sticker these. They'll sit around for months. Then I'll glue them up. They'll stick around for months again. As I process, there'll be lots of different multiple curing times. Okay. From this, once this blank is ready to go. You know, using this, I'm using the table saw or processing. I'll use the table saw, the joiner, the planer.
Carpenter tools.
Yeah, just regular woodworking tools.
Yeah.
From that, I've developed lots of templates will go on into play. These are all the templates I needed to make to route the interior on Retablo. Wow. So every place there was a change of profile, I had to make a new template for. So these are just all screwed together right now for storage. But these locating pins go on the body first. So every template hits the same locating pin.
Oh yeah.
So they're perfectly aligned. And then I do all that work on the pin router.
Retablo body, plexi. recess.
Yeah, that's
cool.
that template.
Okay.
And then you see over here, like for instance, this is what I did on the perimeter. So those tooling holes were still there. So when I did, everything referenced off those holes, and then at the end, I would just cut those off and hand profile those.
Wow.
And that's what the brass trim ring template was.
And what machine did you cut that on?
That one I actually cut. This I cut on the NC, and I also did the actual template on the NC.
Okay.
When I did it first, when I did the first art guitar, Woman is a Machine, about 12 years ago, I did this all on the scroll saw and filing.
No kidding.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah, you had 200 hours in that.
Yeah. That was a tough one.
Yeah.
And then, once that's machined out, it gets screwed to another tool that I do all of my sanding and buffing on. So that's why that's so black.
Wow.
It's just for the buffing.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
engrave what it is, because a couple years from now I won't remember what
That's
was
right.
what.
And they look a lot the same until you actually get into them.
That's it. And there's
All right.
just for the insert.
Okay, so the wood is awesome, and the woodworking tools are awesome. Show me some of the tools and equipment that you use to make the bodies, and then we'll move on to the necks on these things.
Sounds good.
Fair enough?
Sure. Let's start off here. This is probably the main tool I would use when doing any of the work, which is my old Unisaw. And this is this one goes all the way back to Leo Fender's days of Fender Fullerton.
No kidding.
Yeah. I bought this one from the Fender factory when they quit using it. In fact, underneath, if you look, there's a Fullerton hardware sticker on it where Leo used to buy all his tools, and then also a CBS asset tag, the brass tag with the number on it. So when CBS bought the company in '65, they put asset tags.
So when the corporation came in, they had this sort of...
So it's got some magic mojo going on with it.
So we've got other tools here, and then on the bodies, and then necks coming up. This is a nice planer.
Yeah, nice little jet planer. In fact, this was handed down to me from John Sir, who's another excellent guitar builder, and it was handed down to him by Tom Anderson, another great guitar builder. So this is like 3 hands of guitar builders by the time it got to me.
Gosh.
And, just an older thicknessing sander Delta, joiners, my old 8-inch joiner Delta over there. Pretty traditional woodworking tools for that.
Yeah.
Bandsaw is critical, to cut out. I do all my pre-cuts on that. I'll cut, the slight amount of clearance, so then I can go to the pin routers.
And route it right to 0.
Right.
Okay.
And then we get into my pin router over here. I have 2 different pin routers. I have a small one here, which is more for light work. And then my heavier duty one, my Grizzly here.
So let me just admit, I've never seen a pin router until I walked into your shop.
Oh, okay.
How awesome.
My last pin router is sitting out
there. That's what's out there, that
big
old
rusty
beast.
one out there. But it was an old Onsrud from the 50s.
Wow.
That one finally died and wasn't worth
Wore it out.
going. Well, a pin router is kind of cool because it actually called that because there's different size of pins that go in here. In this case, I was doing used a laminate trimmer for a profile operation. Sure. But that's where all those templates come into play.
Got it.
They follow the pin, the cutter comes down, and depending on the size of the pin and the size of the cutter, you can compensate.
Perfect cut. All right, necks. The thing that holds the strings.
Yep, necks. Pretty much the same tools for all the rough woodworking. Again, we get into the curing cycles like we did with the bodies. The curing cycle on the necks is even more critical because the neck can move, that's where most of your movement happens.
Sure.
It's thinner, it's narrower, all of the string tension is on it.
And your fingertips are up and down the neck. It's got to be the same, right?
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. So get the wood in, let it cure, cut it rough like this, let it cure again for months, and then as the process goes, same kind of a deal.
So those have been roasted just like those big mahogany slabs?
Yeah, that was roasted as well. And actually, this is roasted as well, but this is roasted maple. This was a kind of process I did on Manzanar. These were the necks. I did one neck for Manzanar, but I had more of that old red rose. I had more of the old redwood, and I wanted to build a couple more of that style. So I made a couple extra necks.
And then that's ebony over the top?
Yeah, this is ebony on this one, and I think Brazilian rosewood. No, Indian on that, and Brazilian on that. That's Brazilian rosewood.
So these little cuts, those are put on with what?
On the table saw with a special tool.
Okay, so, but the spacing on those has to be absolutely precise,
Dead
or the
critical.
intonation doesn't work.
Right, dead
I mean,
critical.
the location of those determines whether the guitar plays in tune.
Yeah, I'm happy to show you the tool I use for that.
Wow. So we already talked about this beautiful ageless table saw, and it can make those little bitty cuts using this sled and this gizmo. Explain this to us.
Well, first off, this is obviously key. You have to have a saw blade that's sized appropriately. So this has been ground down to 22 thousandths.
At the edge, 22 thousandths.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's thicker in the middle, so obviously you have a rigidity in there.
Wow.
Like you would use stabilizers, basically, normally, right? And then this is a sled similar to a box joint sled. So there's a pin here that's precisely offset to the saw blade, a 16th inch pin. This is a template that was made by Stu Mack and offered from a company called Stuart McDonald, guitar building supply place. And so you can get these with different fret scales, these little notches on them.
For different length necks.
Right, and so that's where your precision comes into play.
Okay.
Between that and the accuracy of your sled. And so the fretboard, I have alignment set up here too, so I know where the fretboard goes. You double stick that to that, and then this is just like you would do a box
double
joint.
stick holds your gauge onto your material, and then zzz.
Right, and
Wow.
then you make your cut, and then you move it to the next slot, make your cut, move it to the next slot.
And just like that, the mystery's gone.
The mystery's gone. It's still tedious, though, holding it down perfectly
bet it
and
is.
going through rosewood or ebony is a little bit of a finger strain. After I cut the fret slots,
Okay.
the next thing to do is to take that fretboard with all the fret slots in it and do a pre-radius it. All fretboards have a radius on the fretboard, except classical guitars. Classical guitars are flat. Most electric guitars and acoustic guitars have a specific radius to the fretboard to make it easier to finger.
Okay.
So I normally do a 12-inch radius, and I use this tool over here, sands the heater. And this is actually a swing sander.
Whoa.
So I, again, using double stick adhesive.
Yeah.
I put the fretboard on here after it's been slotted. And then depending on where I have these arms set, I can pick whatever radius I want. Okay. Usually I sand to about 14 on this, so I can hand sand to 12.
So you sand it to a 14-inch radius and then hand work it down to the 12.
Down to the 12 for accuracy.
And you probably have a gauge for that.
Yeah. What happens here is you still have a little bit of belt flex at when you introduce the belt and when you exit the belt. So it's not absolutely perfect in those 2 points. Okay. So that's why I do it while it's still rough. Do this, get it sanded, and then hand detail it afterwards.
So I noticed that the center line on that jig is not parallel to the belt. You do that so you don't have long sanding grooves all the way up and down.
Do that to use as much of the belt width as possible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because if you're just doing that, you'd have to just keep moving it because
of course.
So doing it at an angle, you're actually able to use, doesn't change
belt.
the radius at all, and it allows you to use the whole width of the belt.
Okay, that is something I've never seen or imagined. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is a custom machine for guitar building.
All right, I'm going to think about that in my sword making. All right, so I see the names on these little gauges on the back of the neck shape, and one of them is Clapton. So it makes me think, you get these big name players that would come to you guys or still come to you and say, I want to try this, and you make a shape, and he tries it, and then he says he wants it subtly different somehow. Does that mean you take that neck off and reshape it, or you build another guitar with that shape?
It depends. I mean, it really depends on what the change is. If the neck was becoming smaller or a different shape that was smaller, you might be able to do it on the same neck.
Okay.
If it was, I want it bigger, or a shape that you can't get out of there, then you have to start all over. Yeah.
Okay. And so musicians are fussy. I get this, right? They're hard to please sometimes. Do they come to you with a clear idea of how they want it different, or just a vague, I want more of something subjective, then you have to imagine what that means in the wood?
Oddly enough, a lot of them don't know what they're going for.
Oh, my.
They're just coming to you with, well, I like this guitar.
Okay.
And they might have a guitar that they really like, and they hand it to you and say, okay, I like this 54 Strat I've got. Okay, what do you like about it? I love the tone, hate the neck. Okay, then I know, don't mess with that neck.
Okay.
If I love the whole thing about it, then it's like, well, then why don't you just keep playing that? I mean, it's hard sometimes to try to improve on something that they love so much.
Yeah.
But normally they don't know exactly what they're looking for, and so you have to try to interpret what they're asking for.
Okay. It's like,
and then you're playing. You're trying to find it, right?
yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Try this.
Yeah. Find the Easter egg.
Gosh, that's awesome.
Billy bass. That's Clapton. That's a lot of these are number 2 soft. These are old shapes that we did at the Fender Custom Shop, which is like a 50s soft V. Here's a 56 Strat, but an offset V, so pull the V over to the bass side better so it fits your hand. So these are all just different templates. Billy bass, that's for the WG bass, Bill Giles. Fender Modern C. This is a custom for a customer. U-shape, that's an old like early 50s Telecaster. So they're all different shapes, and I have a card file from, guitars over the years that have all those profiles. So I measure the necks at the 1st and the 12th fret. So these lines are marked here so I know where I have to put my template to see if it matches. So, and then it's marked treble to bass, so I know the bass side of the neck, treble side of the neck. And my goal is to try to get this template to fit as closely as possible, which at this point it kind of does, but it's still pretty rough in here. So to shape the necks, I use a series of rasps. This is probably my main rasp, a 50 Nickerson. And basically you just sculpt. Getting the volute in here is important. I want to see that line just nice and flow real nicely. And when you go up when you're going up the neck and you're playing it, you don't want to have some bump there that you run into. You want to make sure that you stop at 0 position. So then this is just all a matter of carefully shaping, rasping. The shaping process is, once I do the rough cut to get the majority of the meat off, I rasp and scrape and sand to get this profile just right. Once I get the 1st and 12th set, then I use a straight edge just to basically connect those lines, that profile all the way across, so that it feels right to hand. Once this is fretted, you'll see that I still have to keep that flat there, see, while I'm going through this process. Mm-hmm. So when it's done, the problem with glass slides is losing them on the bench. There you go. And then I'll take that and I can scrape that flat away.
Just a delicate little cut. Yeah.
It works great on finish too. Paint finish, like if you got a little repair or something like that, you can scrape the top off.
Wow, that's a pro tip.
Glass slides.
Yeah, that's cool. So John, I see a lot of tools in your shop I've never seen anywhere else. These sanding blocks, that little saw. But this is a shape like nothing else that I've ever seen in woodworking. Talk to me about, in the progression of the neck, what's going on this surface?
Well, this is the continuation of the fretboard radius that we did the rough radiusing on the sander.
That swinging jig.
Right, that's just kind of a rough radius. Now what we had to do is we needed to dial that radius in and make it very accurate. So there's a 12-inch curvature to this fretboard. I dialed that in using these radius blocks.
Okay.
This one doesn't have sandpaper on it, but here you go. Here's one with sandpaper on it. And I have a fixture that I clamp this neck into. I align it perfectly. I lock it in place. And then by hand, take the sanding fixtures, go back and forth, and get it to the position I want it.
Okay.
I usually backlight that, have a straight edge. I mean,
so you can really see.
Yeah, it's getting into like less than 1,000, getting into tenths of 1,000, looking for that line.
Whoa.
And I do it differently than others. I mean, some guys will be rougher with that because you can take it off of the fret. Once this thing's fretted, you're going to have to level those frets anyway. Right. So that's easier. I hate fret leveling. So
really,
the more accurate I am with this fretboard,
right,
and the more accurate I am with my fret pressing and installation.
You're a wood guy. You're a wood guy at heart, aren't you?
Well, I'm metal too, but not that. You know, I just don't like the fret dress.
So I'm used to seeing black here, ebony or whatever. What wood is that right there?
That's hard maple. So it's the same maple species that's on the neck body, but this is bird's eye maple.
Okay. Eastern hard rock maple, unlike the Western broadleaf around here. But it's beautiful, and when the finish is on there and those bird's
it'll
eyes
pop. Yeah.
But it's the same material, just from a different tree.
Yeah, this is still Eastern hard rock on the back. There's
Okay.
your small leaf maple,
Yeah.
but this is quarter sawn, all quarter sawn, and not figured.
Right.
To
Stable,
me, I like it
strong.
more stable, and I like the tone transference. If you think about the way what happens with figure, you have different densities to the wood, right?
Oh.
And your grain, if you get into quilt or flame, your grain is flowing. So if you think of sound waves trying to go through that, it's getting interrupted at every one of those pieces of figure.
But clear vertical grain is just like a telegraph line, man. Boom,
Yeah,
right
it
down
goes
there.
straight there.
How about that?
And then plus with the quarter sawn, it's very stiff, and as long as you cure it properly and give it the time to move where it wants to before you're done, then it stays nice and stable.
What kind of material is that?
That's black Tahitian pearl.
Wow.
Normally those are done with like black plastic, but it just...
Not the same, is it?
Yeah, no, not the same. Plus there's an iridescence and a movement with this that goes really well with the fretboard that's got that movement too.
So I'm going to take a chance and just say I bet it's harder than it looks to get those holes in exactly that spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's using magnifiers and calipers. I lay those things out just perfectly. And then what I do on my drill press is I have a foot switch on my drill press.
Oh, yeah.
So I line it up, and then I'm able, and with a brad point, then I'm get right at the hole and then just bring it down.
Gosh.
So that makes all the difference in the world.
I've got one of those in my shop. Ken Jordan gave it to me. It's a game changer. Your hands are working, and when you're ready, pow.
Yeah. It changes. It makes it so much easier. Because otherwise, you got that thing spinning. Even with
Yeah.
a brad point with a
Yeah.
really nice fine tip,
Yeah.
you're still kind of hunting.
That's
And when
right.
it's like this,
No, yeah, can't
there's
do
no
that.
there's no room for mess.
Awesome. What's next in your process?
Let's see. From there, we're talking the neck is the preliminary, pretty finished shape, but usually within 10,000ths or so final. And then this has been sanded, ready to go. The next process is actually the fret pressing. And I use an arbor press for that. That's got a matching radius. This fret shoe has a matching radius to this.
Okay.
And in this case, I've already cut all the frets, and these frets will be pressed in. These are German frets, and
What
so the
material
real-
is that?
This nickel silver,
Uh-huh.
18% nickel silver, German manufacturer, Jescar, really consistent, really nice, and the little barbs.
Little mechanical bite in there, huh? Going to get a
That's
hold.
what bites. I still glue them in,
Uh-huh.
and that's to fill the air gap. Is all that's for. It's not to hold the fret in. It's to fill the air gap, if there is any, between those barbs and the wood. Again, to
Sound
improve tonal
transfer.
transference. Yeah.
Holy smokes. So we've seen the wood, but what am I holding right here? This is metal. This is steel, yes?
No, that's brass.
That's brass.
It's chrome-plated brass, and
Okay.
it's actually it's known as a bridge on a guitar. It's where the saddles are and the strings go through.
Oh, okay.
It's where you set your intonation and your height of action.
And you made this?
Yes.
From just a piece of brass stock?
Yes, brass rectangular stock.
All right, show us how you do that in a little one-man machine shop like this. Let me get out of the way so we can see what goes on in here.
Well, I have little machines, obviously,
Yes.
because I don't need big major ones. This is a 3-in-1 mill lathe drill press machine, and I do all the rough milling on this bridge on this. So basically taking it from rectangular stock to sizing the blank to facing this off.
Okay.
Then when I get into all these details, like these little recesses here for screws, I'll use this little mini mill over here to do that.
Boy, that is a mini mill.
Yeah, it's pretty tiny. This little table, I have it set up right now as a little pin router.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a little 16th-inch pin under there and a 16th-inch cutter to cut switch slots on pick guards. Because they're 70 thousandths wide, inch long. They're kind of hard to do otherwise.
Yeah.
This is a chucker lathe. I machine all my neck bolts down. I want a specific size and look. So I use this to machine all my bolts to size, face them off, send them out to plate.
I've never heard or seen anything like this. It's
This
awesome.
is a production machine. There is no lead screw. Everything is set for lever action.
Man, that's like an Etch-a-Sketch. That you got to coordinate your two. Wow.
Yeah, and you have to, but you can grind your tools for whatever custom shape you might need, and then it cuts, and it has reverse and forward, so you're able to cut from either side. You just reverse it and cut from the other side.
Oh.
And this is a rotating head, so you can put all different kinds of bits in it, and you just take this and then go different setups.
Okay.
Rotates around.
Okay. Awesome.
Wood lathe here, but
Okay.
I use it primarily as a buffer on the outfeed.
Right.
Works great for my neck buffer. This is industrial cool off the shop in the summertime.
And shorten up your beard if you don't pay attention.
And watch your fingers. Yeah, open the window, turn that sucker on at night, and it clears the place out pretty quickly.
Wow. Okay, so we're back where we started. This is the studio portion, maybe, of his shop area. And he's just pointing out that this is his assembly station. This is the place that these wood pieces he's invested months in finally meet each other, right? This is where they meet and mate up and begin to assume their role in life, making music, right?
Yeah, they start to become guitars here.
Okay.
You know, everywhere else, they're kind of components of a guitar.
Okay.
This one is just a rough prototype I was working on for an artist. So it's been modified. So right now, I'm just going to be going ahead and making the modifications necessary to put in a different type of electronics.
For his particular type of musical expectation,
Right. So like in this case, this was set up for humbucking and single coils, and he wanted to go with P90s in here. So I had to route the body and to orient it perfectly. And I have a tool there to be able to transfer punch those holes.
Okay.
So they'll match perfectly with the pickups when they go in there.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah, this is my detailed bench. Final assembly, setup on the guitars.
So this is where it begins to be a payday for you. You get to see how the grain works with the body and how your tail pieces sit in there. And your vision, whatever your vision's been, suddenly materializes in the real world.
And it's also where you can tell what it's going to sound like because you go bring without it being plugged in. And when that thing sings off the bench, then you know you nailed it.
Oh, man.
Like that piece of redwood.
Like that piece of redwood that rings
Turned
like a bell.
into a bell.
Bong.
When it does that, it did what it was supposed to do.
Wow.
And part of what I do on that to make that happen is actually part of the design too. These bolts are machine bolts, and my necks have brass inserts, threaded brass inserts in the neck. So as opposed to where most bolt-ons are wood screws going in, these are machine screws going into a brass insert. So that mechanism adds to the overtones, gives a better tonal coupling. To me, everything's about the tone transference neck to body and how that all works together. And this is where you hear that for the first time.
So, you know, we were just talking a little bit about artists, and Tommy Emmanuel is high on both of our lists as an exemplary human and a guitar player like nobody else, right? And he has a similar allegiance. I was watching a music video of respecting the melody. Right, when he said he respects the melody, as I remember. And what I hear you saying is everything you do is respecting the tone and the sound and the transfer of those vibrations from the instrument you've created to the ears of the people that receive it.
That's the thing. And what most players, and I looked at it from a songwriting point of view, is you create a relationship with this instrument, right? And it's a very intimate relationship. That's where you're bearing your soul. That's where all your creativity is coming out. So the closer that bond is to the player, the more important it is, right? And so that vibration, that tonal transfer is what the player feels and hears. And it makes a more translucent tool for them to get their emotions out.
All right, so there's been an interesting thing that you've mentioned to me that I want to give you a chance to talk about that's a result of your time at Fender, your time with your own artistic creation, your own reputation running out. Talk to us about John Page Classics, what that means and what it is. Some of these people are going to want to know.
John Page Classic is a company we started that I'm partners with another group of builders who actually build my designs. They build them to my spec. They build them. They're the closest things that has ever been available of my designs that I didn't build, basically. And so that's something we've just kind of relaunched this year, and we're releasing a new signature level of product, which is, I mean, like I said, it's all the specs of my personal hand-built guitars. And what's cool with that is where I could only build, even at my peak, 12, 18 guitars a year. With this, we can do hundreds of guitars a year.
Wow.
So it reaches a lot more people, and it's a lot more affordable than mine, and a phenomenal quality. So yeah, John Page Classic is a big deal that I've been working on for the last 10 years now.
And we'll have a link in the description to that, and you can find him online, John Page Classic, and see what the inventory is. And then there's another thing that you need to watch for, and it's a documentary about the creation and the bringing forth of retablo. This guy's putting his hand to movie making now, and I can't wait to see the story.
Should be a hoot.
Should be a hoot. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. I hope you've learned half as much as I have in John Page's shop. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.